He pressed closer, warmth radiating from his body, a soft vibration of life against the sterile, cold metal. The baby's eyelids fluttered, a fragile, tiny movement, as though sensing the silent presence beside him. A small gurgle escaped from the incubator, barely audible over the rain and hum of machines, and the dog's ears twitched. He leaned closer, letting his head rest lightly on the edge, a gentle, unspoken offer of companionship, of protection, of shared vigil. The room's atmosphere shifted. The parents' rigid panic softened, replaced by something closer to awe. The mother's hand quivered as it reached out to brush the shepherd's fur, feeling the contrast of warm, wet hair against the cold, sterile air. The father exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, chest loosening as he watched the dog's still, steady presence. In this tiny room, amidst the smell of disinfectant, the hum of the machines, and the unrelenting storm outside, a strange sense of calm threaded itself through the fear. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A tether between despair and hope, between fragility and life. The baby's chest moved again, a delicate trembling rise and fall. The dog's nose brushed the blanket, sniffing carefully, his tail flicking once slowly. It was a rhythm that belonged to another world, one that humans could feel but rarely understand, a language of empathy without words, a communion of presence. The parents watched in quiet reverence, sensing an intelligence, an understanding that defied explanation. They whispered softly, voices catching in their throats, murmuring encouragements to both the infant and the dog, as if acknowledging the miraculous intersection of life, instinct, and love in this moment. Outside, the storm continued, rain pelting the roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. The lights flickered again, casting sharp shadows that danced across the walls. But inside the room, the shepherd's warmth radiated against the harsh, clinical air, and the baby seemed to respond, tiny fingers curling slightly, chest rising with more rhythm than before. The parents dared to hope, dared to imagine that perhaps in this fragile span of minutes, the impossible was possible. That life, no matter how small, could be held, cherished, and honored even amidst despair. The shepherd shifted slightly, nudging the baby's blanket with his nose, and the room seemed to breathe with him. Every subtle motion, the soft exhalation of air from the incubator, the gentle rumble from the dog's chest, the uneven, tense rhythm of human hearts, wove a tapestry of attention, care, and understanding. It was a quiet vigil, but one heavy with significance, a shared acknowledgement that this tiny life mattered, that even in the face of possible loss, there was a witness, a guardian, a companion. Time became fluid. Minutes stretched, elongated by the weight of anticipation. Each sound, the clicking of the dog's nails, the faint hiss of the ventilator, the patter of rain against the glass, was magnified, resonating through the parents' bodies. Every breath the baby drew was precious, every flutter of an eyelid miraculous. And still the dog remained unwavering, his presence an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. For the first time, the parents allowed themselves a small, trembling sense of relief. They realized that the shepherd's appearance was more than coincidence. It was a reminder that empathy could arrive in unexpected forms, that love was not limited to humans, and that the world, for all its cruelty and unpredictability, could sometimes offer guardians when they were needed most. The room, heavy with the scent of antiseptic and wet fur, resonated with quiet reverence, a testament to the delicate, fragile, and extraordinary miracle of life, and to the silent, unwavering witness who had chosen to stand guard. The rain continued outside, relentless, but inside there was a momentary stillness, a pause in the storm, a heartbeat shared between infant, dog, and human. The shepherd's eyes reflected a depth of understanding, a quiet wisdom, and the parents felt, for the first time in what felt like eternity, that they were not alone. In the silent whispers of the heart, in the fragile rhythm of life, in the warmth of a guardian's fur against cold, clinical metal, hope flickered. And that hope, fragile as it was, promised that even in the darkest moments, connection, pure, unwavering, and tender, could illuminate the path forward. The storm outside had grown relentless, the rain now a blur against the windows, washing the world in streaks of silver and gray. Each drop struck the hospital roof like a drumbeat of anxiety, each gust of wind rattling the frames as if the building itself shivered at the weight of the world. Inside the room, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic damp fur, and something more elusive, the ache of heart straining against the possibility of loss. The monitors hummed and beeped rhythmically, each sound a reminder that life was fragile, and that even a single heartbeat could tilt the balance between hope and despair. The baby lay swaddled in the incubator, tiny limbs curled protectively against his chest, his skin fragile and almost translucent under the harsh white light. Each shallow breath seemed borrowed, delicate as porcelain, and the parents hovered near, hands hovering above the incubator as if willing him to endure, to stay, to fight. The German shepherd remained steadfast beside them. He had moved closer after the first tentative moments, nose gently brushing the edge of the incubator, eyes alert yet calm. Rain glistened on his dark coat, every droplet reflecting the fluorescent light in tiny stars. His ears twitched at the faintest sound, the soft beep of the ventilator, the subtle hiss of warm air escaping the incubator, the unsteady sigh of the mother's breath. Occasionally, he let out a soft, almost mournful whine, a sound that was neither panic nor despair, but something in between, a resonance of empathy that filled the room in ways words never could. He circled slowly, sniffing the air and leaning closer, pressing his body against the incubator's edge, radiating warmth and quiet reassurance. Every subtle motion seemed to speak, to offer the infant a presence more constant, more protective than the machines around them. The parents began to notice the nuances they had overlooked in the first tension-filled minutes. The father's eyes softened as he watched the dog's chest rise and fall in rhythm with the tiny infant. The mother's fingers grazed the wet fur on the dog's head, seeking some small tether of stability in the storm of emotions that threatened to pull her under. Every subtle movement of the dog, the gentle shift of weight, the brushing of a paw against the floor, the tilt of a head, was a conversation, unspoken but deeply understood. It spoke of patience, vigilance, and an instinctual comprehension that this small life was sacred, delicate, and deserving of protection. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside. Rainbeat patterns seemed to pulse in tandem with the baby's irregular heartbeat, the room vibrating with tension. Shadows from the flickering lights danced across the walls, long fingers stretching toward the incubator, as though trying to hold the fragile life within their grasp. The parents' breaths were shallow, each inhale heavy with fear, each exhale tremulous with the weight of helplessness. Yet in this heavy, almost suffocating air, the shepherd remained an anchor. He did not panic. He did not retreat. He stayed, nose resting near the tiny chest, eyes bright and unwavering, body a bastion against the unknown, a quiet sentinel guarding a life far smaller than his own. Time became elastic, stretching and warping under the tension of waiting. Minutes bled into each other, marked only by the faint rhythmic rise and fall of the infant's chest, the intermittent beep of monitors, and the relentless patter of rain. Every flash of lightning outside illuminated the room in stark white, briefly exposing every shadow, every tremor, every moment of fear etched onto human faces. And yet in those fleeting illuminations, the dog remained still, almost regal in his quiet presence, his gaze unwavering, his loyalty tangible. The parents found themselves leaning into him, unconsciously seeking the grounding that his steady warmth provided. The baby stirred, a subtle movement at first, fingers flexing against the confines of the blanket. The dog's ears pricked forward and he leaned even closer, as if the slight flutter of life was a spark he intended to guard at all costs. The mother let out a shaky sigh, brushing a hand over her mouth to hold back tears, and the father's lips trembled as he whispered reassurances into the empty air. The dog shifted slightly, pressing his head against the incubator, a weight both physical and emotional, anchoring the room, creating a bridge between fragility and presence. It was as though he could sense the unsteady balance of life, as though he alone understood the precise rhythm required to soothe it. Outside, the storm began to ebb slightly, the rain still persistent but less chaotic, each drop now falling in long, deliberate streams. Sunlight fought its way through the clouds, faint and diffuse, painting silver edges across wet pavement. Inside, the room remained tense, but there was a subtle shift, an almost imperceptible easing of gravity in the air. The parents, exhausted from hours of vigilance, allowed themselves a pause, hands brushing against each other, the father's thumb tracing the mother's knuckles in silent support. The dog pressed closer again, nose against the blanket, eyes fixed on the infant as though communicating silently. I am here. I will not leave. We will bear this together. Time stretched, elongated into an almost sacred space. Every detail mattered. The soft rise and fall of the baby's chest, the faint vibrations from the dog's steady breathing, the rhythmic patter of rain against the window, the whispered reassurances between two terrified humans clinging to hope. Even the smell of wet fur, mingled with antiseptic and the faint scent of newborn skin, became a tangible anchor in the storm of emotion. Shadows shifted slowly, the light of the room flickering against walls and floor, yet nothing disturbed the tableau at the center. Infant, parents, and the dog, locked in a delicate balance of life and attention. The dog's presence had transformed the room from a space of fear into one of vigilant intimacy. There were no words exchanged, but communication was present in every tilt of his head, every careful breath, every small, intentional movement. The parents began to notice these subtleties, marveling at the depth of understanding emanating from a creature so different from themselves. They leaned in closer, voices soft, hearts heavy yet buoyed by the unspoken comfort radiating from the dog. It was impossible to quantify, impossible to explain. Yet in that quiet, rain-filled room, it was as if life itself had been granted a fragile extension, a brief reprieve from the cruel weight of uncertainty. Minutes passed, heavy and slow, until the mother, her voice barely audible, whispered, "A thank you." Not to the machines, not to the storm, but to the dog. Her words trembled, carried on a breath of awe and gratitude, acknowledging a presence that had become as vital as any human hand. The father nodded, shoulders shaking, eyes moist, letting himself feel the odd combination of fear, relief, and wonder. And through it all, the German shepherd remained, steadfast and unwavering, a silent guardian in a world that often felt cold, indifferent, and unforgiving. The parents' hearts clenched and released in tandem with these small motions, each one a heartbeat of hope in the shadow of fear. They whispered softly, offering encouragement that felt fragile, almost absurd in the face of mortality. Yet their words carried weight when paired with the steady, unwavering presence beside them. The room seemed to shrink, compressing around the incubator, the dog, and the parents, each heartbeat magnified, each breath precious. Shadows shifted along the walls as the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, creating a sense of movement, a subtle reminder that life was not static, that every moment was transient and irretrievable. Yet within this constant flux, the shepherd's presence remained a constant. His gaze never faltered, his body never wavered. He exuded a quiet confidence that life, however fragile, was worth witnessing, worth honoring, worth holding, even if only for a moment longer. Hours blurred. The rain outside fell in muted sheets, the storm now a distant drumbeat on the glass. Inside, the infant's breaths were uneven, sometimes shallow, sometimes trembling in a way that made the parents' hearts lurch with terror. The dog pressed closer, resting his head on the incubator, the warmth of his body radiating through the blankets, a quiet insistence that life should not be rushed. That presence itself was enough to offer solace. The parents began to lean into him, unspoken reliance forming between human and animal soul. Their voices, once shaky and broken, found small moments of steadiness, tempered by awe at the loyalty and empathy they could neither command nor fully understand. The mother exhaled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes, her gaze lingering on the dog. "He's not leaving," she whispered, voice trembling, heavy with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. The father's hand rested lightly on the dog's back, thumb pressing into damp fur, and he nodded without words. The dog shifted slightly, eyes never leaving the infant, and let out a soft, steady exhale, almost in response to the mother's words, a subtle affirmation that he would remain, no matter what. The parents felt a fragile peace descend, a small reprieve from the gnawing fear that had gripped them since entering the room. In that moment, they recognized that this bond, silent and unspoken, had become a lifeline, a tether to the fragile, fleeting miracle of life. Lightning flickered outside, casting brief, stark shadows across the room. And for a moment, everything was illuminated in stark relief. The baby, the dog, the parents, the fragile world they inhabited together. In the rhythm of their shared breath, in the subtle shifts of muscle and fur, in the delicate rise and fall of a chest no bigger than a hand, the room vibrated with the weight of presence, of care, of the profound acknowledgement that life, however tenuous, mattered. The dog leaned closer again, pressing his warm head against the incubator, eyes reflecting both vigilance and empathy. It was as if he understood the stakes, as if he knew the precise measure of attention and warmth required to comfort the fragile soul before him. The parents exchanged glances, heavy with unsaid words, understanding that this moment, this fragile, quivering, luminous moment, was sacred. Tears streaked their faces, unbidden, as they watched the dog's quiet devotion. No words could convey the depth of gratitude, the awe, the helplessness transformed into reverent attention. The infant, tiny and trembling, seemed to respond subtly, chest rising with slightly more rhythm, fingers curling faintly as if sensing the protective warmth pressed close. The room, filled with the quiet symphony of rain, monitors, and breath, became a space apart from time, a world suspended between mortality and presence. Hours passed. The baby's breaths remained uneven but persistent. The parents allowed themselves small, shaky smiles, fragile as crystal, moments of reprieve from the crushing weight of fear. The dog shifted, curling closer, head resting against the incubator, amber eyes bright and unwavering. Each subtle movement, each quiet exhalation, became a tether to reality, a reminder that empathy and presence could span species, that love and attention could manifest in forms they had never anticipated. In the quiet room, amidst the soft drum of rain and flickering shadows, life endured, delicate and luminous, sustained by a connection that transcended human understanding. And in that small sacred space, the parents realized a truth that would remain with them forever, that even when the world seemed poised to take everything from them, presence, quiet, steady, unwavering presence, could hold the line, could offer solace, could make the impossible bearable. The dog, wet from the rain, steadfast, vigilant, and full of quiet love, in the shadows and rain they had found an unexpected sanctuary, and in the warmth of a devoted companion they had glimpsed the profound power of care, empathy, and the delicate miracle of life. The storm outside had finally quieted, leaving only the faint patter of rain against the hospital windows, like a whisper of grief that lingered in the air. Inside the room, however, tension remained unbroken, a weight pressing against every surface, every breath. The monitor's rhythmic beeps had begun to falter, their steady cadence interrupted by faint, irregular alerts. The infant's chest rose and fell in delicate, uneven movements, each one seeming smaller, more fragile than before, as if life itself had narrowed into a single, tenuous thread. The parents leaned closer, knuckles white against the cold metal of the incubator, voices soft, trembling, offering fragile words that could scarcely bridge the chasm between fear and hope. Each exhale was a prayer, each glance an unspoken plea for time, more minutes, more hours, more fleeting moments that might defy the inevitability looming over the room. The German shepherd shifted again, pressing his head gently against the incubator's edge. His amber eyes were bright, almost luminous in the harsh fluorescent light, reflecting both vigilance and an intelligence the parents could not fully comprehend. He exhaled a slow, steady breath, and in that motion the room seemed to pause. Every sound, the soft drip of rain, the faint hum of machines, the quiet shuffle of the parents' feet, suspended in a delicate balance. The dog's warmth radiated through the blankets, an anchor in a sea of fear, a constant presence that seemed to remind the infant, the parents, and even the world itself that life, however fragile, deserved attention, respect, and love. The father reached out, trembling, to stroke the dog's damp coat, finding in the simple motion a grounding force against the torrent of anxiety consuming him. The mother's hand followed, brushing gently along the strong contours of the dog's neck, tracing the rhythm of his breathing as if counting heartbeats alongside the infant's. The dog remained still, steady, every movement purposeful, a silent act of devotion. He had become the bridge between despair and solace, a sentinel of quiet understanding, and the parents, exhausted, terrified, and awash in grief, felt a fragile tether forming between themselves, the infant, and this unwavering presence. The baby's chest trembled with each irregular breath, so slight that it might have gone unnoticed if not for the dog's proximity. The shepherd leaned closer, nose brushing the blankets, body pressing warmth into the fragile space as though lending every ounce of his being to the tiny life before him. A soft, almost mournful whine slipped from his throat, low and resonant, carrying something more than sound, empathy, solidarity, vigilance. The parents felt it in their bones, a strange, profound reassurance that though mortality had stretched its shadow across the room, their child was not entirely alone, and neither were they. Time slowed, each second stretching long and taut. The monitor stuttered, alarms sounding briefly before falling silent, each interruption a jolt through the room. The parents leaned into one another, the mother's face pressed against her husband's shoulder, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. Her fingers clutched the incubator's edge as if her grip alone could anchor the baby to the world. The father's hands trembled against the dog's coat, searching, pleading, begging for some miracle that felt just beyond reach. And yet, amidst the chaos, the shepherd remained composed, unwavering, his body a quiet, steadfast presence. He did not panic. He did not move away. He simply pressed closer, exhaling warmth, offering companionship in a language that transcended words. The baby let out a small, fragile gurgle, and for a moment, hope sparked like a fragile flame. The dog's ears twitched, his head tilting slightly as though acknowledging it, pressing closer in a subtle celebration of life's persistence. The parents exhaled with shaky relief, whispering soft words, their voices carrying gratitude, awe, and exhaustion all at once. Every heartbeat, every shallow breath, every tremor of life felt magnified, weighted with significance, as if the universe itself had narrowed to this room, this moment, this tiny, luminous connection of human, animal, and fragile life. Minutes stretched into what felt like eternity. Then the room shifted imperceptibly. The monitor's alarms faltered, the soft hum of machinery interrupted by the almost imperceptible stillness in the incubator. The baby's chest, once rising in fragile rhythm, now paused, hesitated, and then slowed, every movement fading into silence. The parents' breaths caught. The mother's cry choked in her throat. The father's arms trembled as he pressed closer, eyes wide, refusing to turn away even as grief clawed through him with relentless force. The dog reacted not with panic but with quiet presence. He lowered his head until his nose rested gently against the infant's tiny chest, feeling the last flicker of life, offering warmth, companionship, and dignity. His amber eyes glistened, reflecting the light of the room, unwavering, steady, full of an unspoken understanding. In that moment, he became more than a guardian. He became a witness to the final, sacred act of life, bearing silent testimony to the bond between being and presence, between love and mortality. Tears streamed freely down the parents' faces as they held one another, leaning into the dog, into warmth, into life that had been fleeting but luminous. The mother's fingers trembled as she brushed a strand of hair from the infant's face, whispering apologies, reassurances, promises that would never reach their intended recipient, but still needed to be spoken. The father's hands pressed into the dog's fur, the sensation grounding him as the final moments stretched taut and unyielding. The rain outside softened, each droplet a gentle patter, a mournful accompaniment to the quiet passage of life. And then, as the last heartbeat faded, as the room sank into an unbearable silence, the dog remained. He did not move, did not turn away, did not abandon the room. Instead, he rested beside the infant, a quiet sentinel, exhaling warmth and steadfast presence, his amber eyes bright and unwavering even in the face of ultimate loss. The parents leaned into him, shoulders shaking, hearts breaking, and yet held together by the gravity of his devotion. Grief and awe mingled in the room, inseparable, raw, and suffocatingly beautiful. The father whispered, hoarse and broken, "He stayed with him." The mother nodded, tears streaking her face, voice catching as she murmured, "He didn't leave him alone." The dog's gaze flicked briefly to them, as though acknowledging their grief, offering quiet comfort, an unspoken promise that love, even in the face of death, endure. The room, once filled with the urgent, frantic tension of fragile life, now held a different weight, a sacred stillness, a shared mourning, a recognition that presence, attention, and love could leave a mark far greater than words, far deeper than time. Minutes passed, and the parents allowed themselves to lean fully into grief, supported by the steady warmth of a companion who understood loss in ways words could never capture. The room felt sacred, charged with the memory of what had been, and the dog remained unmovable, a guardian against the solitude that often accompanies heartbreak. His soft exhalations, the steady rhythm of his body, and the quiet dignity in his gaze transformed the room from a place of death into a space of reverent witnessing, a testament to the extraordinary depth of connection possible between living beings. And as the rain finally ceased, leaving silver light spilling gently across the windows, the parents realized something profound, that in the fragile, fleeting moments of life, they had witnessed a love that transcended species, a devotion that could neither be commanded nor explained, and a presence that would forever imprint itself upon their souls. The German shepherd, wet from the storm, steadfast and luminous in his amber gaze, had given the last gift, the gift of witnessing, of honoring, and of loving quietly, unwaveringly, in a world too often cruel and indifferent. The storm had passed entirely now, leaving the streets outside wet and glistening under a pale, hesitant sunlight. The hospital room, once charged with urgent tension and fragile hope, was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of machinery and the subtle, steady presence of the German shepherd. He lay curled beside the empty incubator, head resting near where the infant had taken his final breaths, eyes luminous and watchful. The parents remained on the cold tile floor, leaning against each other, shoulders pressed together, hands entwined. Their grief was raw and unfiltered, spilling freely in quiet sobs and tremulous shudders, in moments of silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. Yet beneath the pain, there was a subtle shift, a gentle recognition of what had transpired, and of the remarkable witness who had stayed through it all. The mother pressed her forehead to the father's shoulder, inhaling the warmth of his coat, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the comforting presence of the dog beside them. He stayed with him, she whispered again, voice thick with tears, yet filled with awe. The father nodded, trembling, eyes fixed on the dog, and slowly, almost reverently, reached out to stroke his damp fur. The dog exhaled softly, eyes locking briefly with theirs, amber gaze full of quiet understanding, as if acknowledging their loss, sharing it, absorbing it. In that moment, the parents felt a tether to life itself, fragile yet undeniable, a reminder that love and loyalty could endure beyond what they thought possible. The room seemed suspended in time, each detail magnified by the parents' grief and the lingering presence of their steadfast companion. The faint drip of rainwater from the ceiling, the subtle hum of monitors, the gentle exhalation from the dog's chest, all combined into a rhythm that was at once mournful and comforting. Shadows shifted with the light, long and delicate, casting the room in muted tones that softened the starkness of loss. The parents allowed themselves to breathe shakily, leaning into the rhythm of the dog's presence, finding grounding in a creature whose devotion was unwavering and unspoken. The city outside slept under the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional drip of water from gutters, yet inside, a quiet peace had begun to settle. A peace born not of forgetting, not of moving on, but of recognizing, honoring, and carrying forward the lessons of devotion, witness, and love. Before leaving, the parents lingered, hands brushing the dog's fur one final time, murmuring words of gratitude and love. He responded with a soft exhalation, eyes bright, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond formed, the care given, and the witness kept. And in that room, empty now of life except for the echo of presence, they realized something profound. That even in loss, even in grief so raw it seemed unbearable, there could be hope, healing, and memory carried forward in acts of love. In the steadfast presence of those who stay when others cannot. In the quiet, amber gaze of a devoted companion who had given everything he could in the face of mortality. And as the parents finally rose, supporting one another, stepping toward the world outside that glimmered wet and reflective under the moonlight, the dog followed, tail low, head held high, a guardian still by their side. In that quiet aftermath, the lessons of the day remained etched into their souls, that love, empathy, and devotion leave indelible marks, that witnessing is a gift as sacred as life itself, and that even in the shadow of mortality, presence can become an eternal echo of connection. They stepped into the night together, hearts heavy but tempered by awe, carrying with them the memory of a small life and the unwavering witness who had stayed with him until the very end.